Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to a special town council meeting. Today is January 14th, 2025. We're in the Harvey Hearing Room. Call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Counsel Tasneri.
Here.
Counsel Costigan.
Here.
Counsel Munson.
Here.
Counsel DeMarco.
Here.
Counsel Aiello.
Here.
Counsel Swope. Here. Counsel DeRoss.
Here.
Vice President Belcher.
Here.
President Lettieri.
Here.
Thank you.
Please stand for the pledge. Councilor Munson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry.
All right. So just a couple of things today. Our town manager is at a conference. He will be here before 7 o'clock, which is why originally we had planned this at 6 o'clock, but tried to push it back a little bit so Tony could make the majority of the meeting. This is going to be a 1.5-hour discussion, kind of bring us up to date where we are, thoughts, concerns, next steps on the middle school site. So having said that, just to do a little recap, and if I forget anything, people could bring it up after. The middle school's been vacant since 2016, September, later part of 2016, going on 9 years. Over the past 9 years, we've had several proposals, several thoughts. We've had an FRI go out. We've had surveys done. We've had different plans. Those plans started back, I think it was 2017, and there was a group that came in. I think Joe was part of it, Lisa Alberghini, I know Russ was part of it. And it was an exciting time. The thought was that we could maybe build a rink at the top of the hill, a new rink, do some development down at the bottom. The hope was in 3-year time frame from then, we'd be able to open something for the 40th anniversary, I think, of Miracle on Ice. That was the thought. We were just in the process, the town council had just given the rink committee at the time a green light to do a locker room expansion down at the rink. We had had plans drawn up. We were ready to go. We had some questions from some people that were on this committee to give them 3 to 5 months to look at the possibility of getting financing. So we held off on the locker room expansion, and it kind of died on the vine. There was never any talk about financing. In 2018, I had a developer come to me who was interested in the middle school only, not the auditorium, not the gym, not the rink. The proposal then, what he was interested in was to gut the middle school, not tear it down, to build 65-odd units within the current middle school, the old middle school. The thought then was, the idea that was presented was they would use the Brookfield Road entrance to the back of the middle school. Cars would go in and go right into what is the old cafeteria. That would be the underground parking. They were going to use existing elevators. Their request was to have an additional floor put on. The floor was, the additional 4th or 5th floor would have been glass. It would have been set back, so it wouldn't be intrusive to the neighbors. It was going to be landscaped and such. And the council had no interest in pursuing that when I mentioned that. In 2019, a previous town manager wanted to tear down the rink and put an L-shaped building down at the corner of Walden and Pauline with upwards of 150 units, and that never went anywhere. A couple of years ago, I came here, a year and a half ago, with thought of having a sports complex there. They would have built an additional rink with a field house that would have been used by the town and by the school department. The property would have remained with the town of Winthrop. The developer would have leased the property and ran a sports business there. And that also didn't seem to have consensus within the council. Other ideas that have been discussed is just to tear the gym, the auditorium down and just have green space. There has been thoughts to tear the gym, the auditorium, and the school down and have green space. There's been discussions of 50 and over community. There's been discussions, and I still have calls out to 2 hotel developers to give a thought if there was any interest in a small boutique hotel there. There has been much talk about potential units there, either affordable units, either townhouse units, or a combination of both. There's been discussion of a Lynn Auditorium concept where we would provide a venue for shows and events, and drama department could use it, schools could use it and such. That was thought to be of a stimulus for the center business. It was also thought to be a stimulus for taxes for the town. The thought there was that the town would maintain ownership of the property. The problem there, or the problem would be, is the cost to renovate the auditorium and all the work that needed to go into that. There's also been discussion of a school, saying that, geez, we have 3 relatively new schools, but they're all at capacity. Maybe we should keep it for a school because we might need that. The most recent discussion has been about tearing down the school and the auditorium, leaving green space between the gym and potentially 5 townhouse lots at the top of Wheelock, kind of the corner of Wheelock and Pauline. This way it would create a natural buffer for the neighborhood, kind of complete that neighborhood off, would give some more green space for the town and a buffer zone between the gym and the ice rink. The consensus, I guess if we could call it that there seems to be, is that anything that's done there would either maintain the current rink as is, or build a secondary rink and then develop the rink. So the one consensus I think there seems to be is that a rink, and I don't even want to say a gym is a consensus. I think it should be, because of the lack of gym space and just space, recreation space we have for the children of our town. I think the gym should be included, and I think that seems to be a consensus. I don't want to speak for the other councilors, though. And then there's also been, through this whole process, discussion of Article 97, which I'm going to wait for, Tony to come in, and he's going to give a presentation on that. And, last but not least, there's obviously been discussion of a firehouse there. We've talked about firehouse for the last handful of years. I mean, it's been discussed for the last 30 or 40. This time, it's come down to 2 locations. The location we had presented a couple of years ago obviously wasn't liked by the town, along with the cost of the building. So we have brought up the idea of 2 locations now, one being the middle school site, where a fire station would potentially be built near the top of the hill. It would be fire station only. The gym and the rink would stay there. The spacing was such, when we had them do a plan for us, that it would not have enough space to do a police station there. But it would be a fire station only. There would be a lot of benefits. Obviously, it's town-owned property. The additional cost, which is about $4.5 million more than the potential site at the basketball courts, and that cost is more for the infrastructure cost, because there are major infrastructure concerns underneath there that whatever is done with that property need to be addressed. Now, would it be addressed by the town, or would it be addressed by a potential developer? That would have been the question. The other thought that's always been out there as we discuss numerous options is income for the town. There's always been that discussion about, we need to look for additional revenue streams, we need to look for stimulus for businesses in town. So the thought was always, if you had some real estate taxes coming in, it would be a plus for the town and for the town's budget going forward. So there hasn't been, I guess, a lack of effort in some way, shape, or form, but I'm not trying to disperse blame on anybody but me and the council for having this going on year 9 now. But there are a plethora of ideas. The question, sometimes it's too many ideas, and maybe the idea is looking us straight in the face. Maybe, I've said it to people before, the easiest solution for us, and easiest isn't the best always, but the easiest solution is to just say, let's put the firehouse there, and let's move on from that. There seems to be discussion in the town about the middle school being the best option. What you lose from that is obviously funding, which is an additional $4.5 million. The other thing you lose is potential revenue stream for the town, and a potential stimulus for businesses. But sometimes the easiest ideas are the best. But so what I'd like to do now for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, start going around the table. And when Tony comes in, we're going to go back to the Article 97 to talk about that, because that's been a big discussion point over the last several years. So I will start this way with Councilor DeRoss. If you want to wait and hold off a little bit, if you have a thought.
Sure, thank you. I'll just start with where you ended, which is, it's one of our only remaining parts of town where we can build something that is revenue generating. And given the financial challenges that we know we all have in the coming fiscal year, I think the place to start is, as opposed to the specific ideas, which we'll obviously get to, what are the outcomes that we want? Can we agree on the outcomes that whatever is put there will generate? Hopefully, we would agree that revenue is one of those outcomes we want. And like you said, Council President, that could be revenue that comes from property taxes for some type of residential building, townhouse, et cetera, that you described a minute ago. It could be a business that takes advantage of the fact that it is part of our central business district. It would join the business community. It could produce revenue, whether that's recreational revenue, et cetera. I know constituents from my precinct, but also across other parts of town, have also been very specific to call out things that they need to go far out of town to get to at this point in terms of recreation. So for example, one of my residents in Precinct 6 said, I take my kids swimming and we have to go to the Melrose Y to do that. So having lived in Melrose for 8 years, I know exactly how far that is from Winthrop. That's a drive, right? And I'm aware from a couple of folks who have written into us that there have been committees in the past that some of you might remember who did explore possibilities of things like a recreational facility with a track, with a pool, et cetera. Each of them come with their own pluses and minuses, right? Pool would be great to be able to have folks of all ages, kids all the way up to older folks in town who can use that for their own exercise purposes, swim lessons, et cetera. I've seen people write in to say, we've got 4.5 months of winter here where I'm a runner and I can't run anywhere in town because the streets are iced up. Is it possible to have a track of some kind, in a field house set up, that kind of thing? So personally, I would like to see a few things come out of this in terms of outcomes. Revenue would be one. Some type of opportunity for recreation, particularly for community members. And then the third part, I think, would be something that takes advantage of the location of the site being part of the CBD, and we can naturally drive traffic to the businesses that are right there in the CBD. So I'm completely open to whatever idea we finally land on, but those are the 3 top outcomes that I would have in mind.
Thank you. And before I go to Suzanne, just a couple of things that that Councilor DeRoss touched on is we did, you talked about a pool a little bit, we did even contact YMCA's to see if they were interested in the spot. You know, pool does come with a lot of situations, a lot of insurance and situations like that, but we thought YMCA comes in, builds a facility, people can use it, blah, blah, blah. Didn't have an interest. The indoor track was part of the field house thought that I had a year and a half ago. And the other thing I'll just touch on, because I didn't mention it, is that we have got, now they're several years old, but we have another company that's hopefully coming in soon to give us an updated assessment, but we did get a demolition cost. Demolition cost for middle school and auditorium was a little under $1 million, probably about $850,000 to $900,000. Then there was also an additional cost for remediation of asbestos that we know was in the building, which would be probably in the vicinity, from what we're told, another $700,000. So somewhere around 1.6 to 1.7 to basically level the property, just the auditorium and the school. Counselor Swope?
Well, we've had enough ideas, I think. I'd like to just start with my understanding, actually, of what we have surveyed and what we actually have to work with. And so I think that Tony's discussion about 97 is gonna be very helpful to me, so that I can understand what land we have that we can do something with. That's number one. Number two, I talked to Pat just earlier, thinking about the site for the firehouse. I know we're gonna need an engineering study on that to determine whether the Walden Street one that we talked about is a good idea. And I don't know if we're really set on that. So, of course, as you've mentioned, the firehouse being up there, I mean, on Pauline Street, might be a real possibility. Thirdly, this notion that we should make money, I think, is also a great potential as part of the CBD, which is what our commitment was as part of the CBD. But I think it would be wonderful if it could be a community-like feel, with green space, with some kind of recreation facility, as well as some housing. And that housing, we talked about it being over 55 and affordable. That might be a possibility, since we've talked about that in other ways, and we might have the space for that. I'm open, interested in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Aiello?
I think the comments of Councilor DeRoss and Councilor Swope are right on the money. I would add to it that we really need to understand the site as well as we can. We need better mapping. I know some mapping has been provided, but I think mapping that anybody in the community can understand, which maps the various parcels of property that were transferred over the years, under what circumstances, up against what's there today. Because I think we've got some really good, better information than we've had before, but I don't think it's in a form that's worth it. The other is to sort of think about urban design issues a little bit. We talk about places that we're proud of. Once whatever gets built, it gets built. We should be thinking about the characteristics of the land and what it means. We got Ingleside Park, which is sort of a precious asset on one side of us, and we want to make sure that we're respectful of Ingleside Park, and that gets to view corridors, it gets to shadows, it gets to all of drainage, all of that stuff. There's also the reality that the site is high up by Wheelock Street, and then low as you get down to Waldemar, and which presents at the lower end an opportunity, but also a challenge, right? The challenge is that it's low, and it's an area where we're all worried about flooding and all that stuff, and we gotta think about the developability down that end of the parcel. But in reality, if we wanted something that needed some massing that creates some tax revenue, and maybe workforce housing, a place where you can go up a little bit, it would be at that end of the site, right? Because you're not next to anybody's property and anybody's home, et cetera. So that might be a place where you think about more density and less density up at other ends of the site. So I think we need a real good urban design analysis as we go through this. I don't know if the planning board can play a role in helping us think about some of this stuff, but I think as we go through, I'd like to make sure that we take good care that whatever decisions we make, that the end product is gonna be something we're all proud of.
All right. And I'm just trying to keep some notes here. You had said you agreed with Counselor DeRoss and Counselor Swope. I think Counselor DeRoss was more on some sort of revenue stream for the town and some sort of stimulus. And Counselor Swope said that, but also mentioned the possibility of firehouse. Are you with that?
You know, I'm open on the firehouse possibility. So I think we'd have to have listen, I think everything should be on the table, to be honest with you, for the site and as well as for the firehouse. I think it's critical for us to have a site on the firehouse. It's very clear we all support the firehouse on this council. We need to make sure that we kick the tires on the two alternatives again and satisfy ourselves we get the one that the voters that will support, okay? Because bottom line, we cannot fail to pass the measure for a firehouse this round, in my mind. So if that means changing our mind because of further analysis, I'm happy to have that discussion.
Okay. Counselor DeMarco?
Hey, thank you, Council President. So first off, as far as the middle school site goes, we're bleeding money there. Every year, every second, we're bleeding money. Tear it down. All right? That's where my position is. Tear the building down. You know what? It's green space. Awesome. We have more green space in town. I think that would be fantastic. And if we have to build later, we can look at Article 97 and look at the parameters and do that, okay? But they have to be built on the parameters of Article 97. I would love to have more green space in town. I think it would be awesome to have a green space to walk from the center into Ingleside Park. I think that would be fantastic. We have some decisions to make. We'll make those decisions. And, I also think it's very important that the town gets to vote on issues, okay? So you people will decide whether, what gets built and what doesn't. I mean, we're at that point now. It should be your decision. And I'll support whatever the people need. That's it.
Vice President Belcher?
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the point that most counselors have made that the revenue-generating potential for this site is imperative. I think when we think about a fire station here, we need to consider the cost not only of the build. We know the Walden Street proposal was about $5 million less, but also the loss of potential revenue. Housing has come up in a lot of the different iterations of plans, and I think that's something we should really consider, whether it's on the low end and more dense or up on the Wheelock Street to finish off that neighborhood, which is my personal preference. I think that's a really nice way to link the CBD to the connecting residential areas. Also thinking about what we have available in the town, we have good resources for our sports teams, we have a new field, but what we don't have is a great space for community theater, things like that. I think the auditorium gives us a unique opportunity for that. Whether I mean, when I was in middle school many years ago, it was not in great shape. I imagine it's abysmal now, but I think we should consider community space like that. It can be used not just for theater, but there's a lot of varieties. We have lots of acting studios and performing arts classes and dance studios, things like that. I think it would be very well utilized in the community. And then for the gym, Parks and Rec uses that heavily. The police use it as part of their community outreach for those drop-in things on Friday nights. It's heavily used, and I think for Parks and Rec, we need to make sure they have a home and a home that fits their needs. When I was growing up, again, there was a building for Parks and Rec across from the Willis School that was just kind of a general use area. I'd like to see potential expansion at the gym site with some general use spaces, classrooms. So I think we have these opportunities here that can be built upon, but I think that relies heavily on the addition of revenue from housing, as far as I see it. Now, whether that's workforce housing, senior housing, I'm not sure, but I think before we start moving in the direction of asking for engineering studies or urban design studies, anything like that, we need to have a really clear scope of what we're asking for. Otherwise, we're just throwing money at more plans. When we have a lot of plans, nothing's fully fleshed out, but I think the onus is on us to really put some direction on that and take some leadership in that regard before we move forward towards spending any dollars to get anything researched.
Thank you. And just a couple of things too to clarify. The cost, there is a cost, somebody had mentioned cost. There is a cost to keep the middle school and auditorium open. That cost is roughly 70 grand a year, which, you know, I've heard estimates of 400 grand. It's still a lot of money, especially when you're in year 9. Parks and Rec is obviously a huge issue, not an issue, but a huge concern of mine that I think it provides an extremely important asset for the town, which is why I would like to, at minimum, get consensus that a rink and the gym stay where they are for now, and that we have to decide how we're going to handle it. The rink is pretty much on its own. They have a plan to expand, to include more locker rooms, and that is something that would be done and paid for by the rink and by the users. The gym is something that the town would have to look at into the future to make substantial changes to it.
Council President, do we have a total cost on the Parks and Recreation bill for the old middle school site in terms of what they have?
What do you mean, Bill?
Like, how much do they bring in?
Parks and Rec is its own fund, its own enterprise fund.
Okay,
So it's self-sustaining.
It's self-sustaining. They do get a stipend from the school, from the town.
all right, I just want to be clear to the public what that finance is. I think that's fair. How much are they charged? How much do they pay? How much?
It's apples and oranges to what we're talking about here. Parks and Rec is its own enterprise fund, as is the rink. They're both separate entities. They have nothing really to do with this conversation. The thought was to just make sure Parks and Rec is something that the town wants to keep and maintain, because that's really the only space for them.
100%. Nobody's arguing that. I just want to know what the money is, that's all.
I just don't understand what you're talking about, what the money is. What does that mean, what the money is?
I mean, there's obviously a cost when it comes to Parks and Rec.
Hey, they're an enterprise fund. They pay, the users pay to run the fund.
Okay. That's it. It's all user paid.
Yes, there is a small stipend
Okay.
from the town, as the town has provided stipends to other enterprise funds.
Okay.
Counselor Munson.
I want to say hi to Tony and welcome him here. And then, do you want to segue to Tony, or do you want me to?
No, we have a couple more, and then we'll go
Okay.
to Tony.
Before I go ahead and have my turn, can you just clarify if there have been any estimates of cost to rehab the auditorium and rehab the gym?
To rehab, both of them are several million, several, I don't know, $2 to $5 million for the auditorium, and $2 to $4 million, and those are rough estimates, what we have gotten for the gym. And it depends what you want to do with it, right?
Right. So if you would keep the floor plan and exactly as is, to rehab both would be 2 to 5 per.
Rehab 2 is, yeah, 2 to, well, no.
2 to 4.
2 to
4 to
4
9.
for the gym, and 2 to 4 to 5, a little higher for the auditorium.
Okay. So I guess this is the number one topic. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a town councilor. And so this old middle school has been vacant for a long time, and what I'd like to bring to the table is consensus. And what I'd like to be able to do is hear what people are saying and just try to create a plan that's doable and that we can move forward on, as opposed to kind of fighting over different things. I think that what I'm hearing so far, and what I've heard so far from the residents, is that a residential, well, first of all, the rink is a no-brainer. Like, everyone seems to agree that the rink, there has to be a rink in Winthrop, that all the hockey people like that rink. They don't want it to go. So it seems to me like that is something that we should build from. Rink stays. I've also heard a consensus that we all want revenue, but also approve and would be okay with residential. What that looks like, how big, how tall, do we keep, that's debatable, and that, whether it's workforce housing, affordable housing, 50+, those are all debates. But we could come to a consensus with just a handful of votes, just 5, to ask then Tony to go out and pursue some developers to give us quotes for that residential space. And that residential space is literally where the footprint of the old middle school. Take away the auditorium and the gym out of the conversation and just have that RFP out for that space. And I would even go as far as saying, if we could get the votes, we should ask for an RFP for developers to both demo it and build new, as well as the guy in 2018, the developer that proposed rehabbing the current building. So I guess my big gist would be to find consensus. We have more or less some consensus already without even having this conversation tonight amongst us all shows me that there's already consensus. We just have to build on it. So I think that it's kind of been tried with the hotel. You guys looked pretty hard. The climate, the economic climate may have changed, so it might be different, but I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that. There was a study done in 2017 that showed that the majority of Winthrop was in favor of residential at the old middle school. So I just caution a couple things, and I agree with John DeRoss that we have to agree on outcomes. And the outcome, yes, we want revenue, but we also don't want to have a traffic nightmare. It's already kind of tough to get through there, and so I think that we have to be very judicious with how this is done. I like the idea of having Brookfield be a major entry point. I also like having an underground parking there. Right now, the parking already is maxed out if there's any kind of sporting event at the old gym or at the auditorium or at the rink. So I think that underground parking is a wonderful idea that should be looked into further. And I think that if you had to keep it really simple, you could keep the rink where it is, get some lockers, obviously, keep the gym and the auditorium where it is, and just get RFPs for the residential. We still have to find the money for the rehabbing of an auditorium and the gym, or if we want to think bigger and longer term, we go ahead and build something new adjacent to the rink. And if we're going to be spending $9 million on rehabbing the auditorium and gym, we should have something that a new building isn't much more, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're going to go old, we should look at new too for a similar cost, for not much more. So my point is, let's build consensus, let's move forward with residential, get an RFP out, and we can leave the rest of the stuff alone for now.
Councilor Costigan?
Yeah, well said by all councilors here this evening. Needless to say, a lot of great ideas. Yeah, we have some serious choices to make here as it relates to revenue stream. The use of that area, is it going to be community-based, or do we go, we chase the dollar down the hole? As they say, communities result in their people living longer, healthier lives. So community is what I'm all about, especially Winthrop. And to Mr. DeRoss's point and several others, there is limited amount of green space, let alone developable land in the town of Winthrop, and it is shrinking every day with regards to development and the overall development as it relates to housing itself. So as far as the middle school, yeah, We have to take that down. I do have a question with regards to environmental impact study. We mentioned that months ago. I don't know if that's available, Mr. President, if that was ever done. Environmental impact study on that area and neighborhood?
No.
Okay. So again, we still have some hurdles to climb here. That being said, with regards to the basketball court, Walden all day long, and yes, Council Swope and I did talk earlier. Traffic control devices, electronics, and utilizing those in that Walden area, I think will be very successful as it relates to once the engine pulls out of the station, everything is a stop. And we have that turnaround, as somebody mentioned, for the pickup and drop-off of children. So I think safety there is, I think, under control, and I think is sufficient. As far as the middle school, yes, take that down, revenue generator. There is also, as we talk about townhouses, it has to be something where who's ever going to reside there has to be paying taxes as opposed to rent. So I think we're all in agreement with that. We want to get the most bang for our buck here. There is a cottage, tiny pocket neighborhood company that was quite interesting on YouTube. 8 single-family homes, affordable, on just 0.75 acres. Quite interesting to see. We talk about affordable housing in this town and the lack of thereof. I say, why not we conquer the affordability issue with some housing that would be advantage to be taken upon by our residents. As far as the community pool, as a couple of people have mentioned already, the elderly, aqua aerobics. It's also found to extend the life of the elderly in the community in which a pool is located. People with diabetes, people with medical issues. This is therapy. A pool is a community functioning epicenter for that community. Again, longer life and healthier lives as a result of a pool. With regards to the cost of the pool, we talk about the YMCA. The insurances involved, the liability, et cetera. Yeah, that all plays in. There are many, many towns in this, in cities in this state itself that have wonderful pools. The city of Winchester right now has Swim Winchester, nonprofit. They're raising their monies to build a pool. They're not worried about the liability, nor are they worried about who's going to be running it or how much money is it going to cost. Don't get me wrong, Winchester's much richer than we are, but they see the importance, and again, a nonprofit is running the show for them there. I would recommend this town is strapped for cash. We should take maybe a private partnership with, entertain that in a lot of these ideas here as it relates to the pool and the auditorium itself. There's a company out of Danvers that's their specialty. They go in, they take over auditoriums or old theaters, they rehab them, and they have a circulation of entertainment, concerts, and theater that they cycle through. And that brings in revenue. We can charge for parking. If anyone's gone to Lynn Auditorium, $20 all day to park in those lots over there. It's a great revenue stream. Let alone we have Volos there on Walden Street in the center, and that would bring a tremendous amount of business, I believe, to the community as well. So there's another revenue stream there. And we would save that auditorium. I don't know how many seats there are in there. If anybody knows, it's got to be several hundred, if I had to guess.
2,000.
So there's quite a bit of revenue there as well. Ticket sales, you get a cut of that. And again, this is that private partnership that they can come in and take care of that business for us. No heavy lifting on our part. With regards to Parks and Rec, we needed affordable after-school program for the people in this town. I know I utilized it many times when my daughters were coming up through. My wife was working. They do a great job down there. And again, very affordable as well, which is what people are looking for nowadays. After-school programs are very, very expensive. There's quite a bit of other stuff here as it relates to what that center the middle school should be looking like. But as far as the rink, and I know you're near and dear to hockey, Town Council President, I think a renovation of that rink would be splendid for some of the traveling teams to come in. I've been in many a rinks around watching some hockey by other communities, and I'm sorry to say, but our rink doesn't hold up to half of those. We need some serious restroom renovations in there, locker rooms, and I know you know that as well. But again, we have to be looking at revenue for that as well, to bring up that aspect of entertainment. And back to the pool, for those people and those children who don't play sports as it relates to hockey, baseball, football, swim team. You know, when I hear online, hey, we're surrounded by the ocean. Well, half the time the beaches are contaminated and you can only swim 2 months out of the year. So I'm tired of hearing that rhetoric online. People saying, oh, we're surrounded by an ocean. When's the last time you put your toes in the water? That's all I'll say. I could go on and on, needless to say, but that middle school area is very, very important for this community. I think it's the last holdout with regards to this town actually doing something, you know, that's a benefit to everyone in this town, for the community. And again, when you're looking for money and you're asking people to vote on it, if you're excluding a certain portion of people, guess what? They're gonna vote no. And I say that over and over again. You have to be inclusive to everybody in this town, especially a small town like this. And if you're not, guess what? It's not gonna pass. So we can dream all day long here, but we have to be inclusive and include everybody in this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor
And
Costigan, just,
Please, let's just move on, and then we'll get that. And again, just on one point on the rink and expansion, locker rooms, the locker rooms, there's been a plan around for several years now with regards to locker rooms, restroom, completely done. That is not, just to make sure everybody's understanding of that, any expansion that would have been done or would be done in that terms would be paid for out of the rink. It's not a town, it's not asking the town for money or for the citizens for money. The users of the rink pay for the bond for the renovations. Councilor Tassinari.
Thank you, Council President. I very much appreciate the work that my fellow councilors put into thinking about this site. Granted, we've had 9 years to think about it, or, you know, most of us have. I would say that that's not a bad thing at this point, though, because what we're lacking right now completely is a vision for the future. This really, again, we're taking one piece of land and we're looking at it in a vacuum when it may be the only piece that we can move right now, but it's certainly not the only piece on the board that we have available to us as town land. I will apologize to Councilor Munson. You'll not get consensus from me for a long time until we see what a 5-year, 15-year, 25-year plan town-wide is gonna look like. And if that has to sit there for another year or two, then it sits there for another year or two before we have a vision of what we want our town to look like, a financial impact study of what is likely to happen with the current zoning, before we even talk about adding residential area to that site. And another look at the WIN 2030 plan that would be nice to be presented in front of the whole council at a council meeting so it can be reintroduced to the public and reintroduced to this council, where I've had the luxury of looking it up and finding it online, but I would appreciate it being really laid out in some detail as to what went into that, what that WIN 2030 covers, because from what I could see, it wasn't a town-wide kind of plan. A lot of great ideas, I like Councilor DeRoss, you balanced it down to 3 points: revenue, recreation, and increasing foot traffic in the center. That's really good. I think that we can achieve those things. I think that site should be eventually used to build another school. I think a school that will, well, first, let's talk about the rink first, because we love hockey in this town. Our rink isn't even a full sheet of ice right now. And I don't think there's anywhere in the locker room build-out plan or restroom build-out plan which will give us a full sheet of ice and enough stands to accommodate MIAA regulations. So I would say we should move the rink to where the school building is and build a school, a community center that includes a public auditorium that would bring in foot traffic, a pool that's useful for everybody in this neighborhood, in this community, and a gymnasium to replace the one that's there. And I really like the Vice President mentioned general use spaces, some more general use spaces that could be added into a school building. If we build that school building for the capacity to take what our financial impact study and our master plan would say is a likely population of students K through 6, you can build that for the capacity for K through 6. You can keep the Cummings School for 7 and 8. You'll open up space at the middle high school, where the middle school is being held, so that we can accommodate for a larger population of high school age children. And then you'll open up Fort Banks area for industrial commercial, which is a much more less traffic, I would say, less centralized area that you can use to partner with a real industrial partner and bring in the kind of revenue that you're not going to see from annual real estate taxes.
Thank you.
That's what I see, but I think we're far behind the 8 ball on something like that. I think we need to do the groundwork for this site, understanding where we stand in terms of title. Article 97, I know Attorney Cipolletta put together a great memo for us tonight with some great visuals, a little more source documentation for that stuff that we could present to the public so that everyone's on the same starting point as to what is there for available land. A presentation on Win 2030, a financial impact study and a presentation of that when it's completed, and feeding all that stuff into a new master plan for the vision for the next 5, 15, 25 years. I think we need to stop taking things in a vacuum, open up our eyes. It's not what do we have here? 160,000 square feet of the rink, the gym, the auditorium, and the middle school. It's the 1.3 square miles of the town of Winthrop and what's available to the town for public space and public buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank each council. I'm going to, before I send it to Tony to give us a brief overview on Article 97, I just want to say that I know I understand a lot of councilors are relatively new to this. You know, it's been 9 years. I could take all the blame because I've been sitting here for every one of them, but others have been here, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever the time is. But
It's all your fault. I'm kidding.
I just think we need to be realistic in what we're even discussing. We have an incredible need for a fire station wherever it is, whenever it is. But to talk, and hey, I'm as big a hockey guy as there is, but to really think that we're gonna spend $20 or $30 million to build a rink in a community center, which I would love, is not going to happen. To do some of the things that we've all discussed a lot of options, and most of them are probably unrealistic, and it will probably be another several years. If we look at realistic options, it is potentially tear down the middle school and the auditorium, sell 5 townhouse lots up at the top of the street, have some green space. That's realistic. That could be done. Do we want to wait another 3, 4, 5 years? I don't, but again, I'm one vote. Is it realistic to have a hotel? I think a hotel is a great thing. It checks a lot of boxes. It brings in revenue. It's an economic stimulus. It doesn't provide problems for the schools in terms of more children going in and such. Is it realistic? I mean, I've tried for the last 7 years and haven't been able to get anywhere with it, so at some point, maybe it's not realistic. Is building 100 units there realistic? Probably is. Is it? I think it's probably the worst thing that the town could do right now, to have that many more units coming in on top of the development that we're already doing throughout the town, on top of the fact that the schools are at capacity. Councilor Tassinari mentioned building a school, which, people don't even want to hear that, again, with the firehouse and overrides and everything else, but is it something that needs to be probably thought about somewhere down the road? It probably does, depending on how built out the town gets. And the last thing is the fire station. Is it realistic to seriously consider switching the sites? And, and again, that's the easiest way out. Go put the fire station at the middle school, near the top of the hill, have some green space there. deal with the infrastructure cost that it's gonna be, put it on a ballot and go that direction. We have plans for both. Anyway, I will ask, because this is a question that's been brought up countless times at meetings, because we talk about a lot of this stuff, and every time we talk about one thing or another, Article 97 always comes up. We've had thoughts as a town, we've put out RFP to make sure we had a plan, a certified plan done. I'll ask the town manager, thank you, Tony, for coming. I appreciate the fact that you left your meeting earlier to get here. But if you could take a few minutes just to go over the findings on Article 97.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Council President. We asked a while back Attorney Cipolletta to take a look at this, as certainly it's come up at several meetings. And I know we asked, before I got here, there was a, similar verdict given by KP Law. This memo breaks down into, 10 different points with the, actually 11, sorry, with the last one being the conclusion. It cites the ownership and boundary concerns, use of the premises, applicability, cites a few case laws, relevant Massachusetts Supreme case law, even a more recent case, Carroll versus the Select Board of Norwell, that was decided back in, just recently in 2024. And clearly how land, received or taken for different specific public purposes may be reused or disposed of. Ultimately, and certainly will, this memo can be put out for, everyone to read, but the conclusion that Attorney Cipolletta came up with was almost identical to what KP Law did, is based on this analysis, the premises are not subject to restrictions of Article 97, as there is no evidence of a permanent dedication to a conservation or public park purposes. This land has been used for various municipal and recreational functions over the years, and the town is not required to adhere to Article 97's protection in altering the use or disposition of this property. The town may designate the middle school property for another specific purpose in compliance with General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15A, and it may also dispose of property by further following the procedures outlined in General Law, Chapter 30B. There is the site plan that we had done by Grady Consultants is in here. That's included in here. Land surveyed plan. So Attorney Cipolletta includes some of the GIS mapping that we have. It also includes the transfer of land procedure, the general laws for 30B, that's also in here, and the Article 97 language. And, we do have these parcels, Attorney Cipolletta did a bunch of homework on it. There was apparently 5 deeds or 5, over the years have been transferred together, and certainly we can provide those deeds as well and pull them up. They're certainly older and handwritten, but it goes back to the, the 1902 that was talked about and when the land was given. But that's his conclusion, similar to what KP Law did before I got here. So that's certainly open for debate and discussion, but that's where it stands.
And can we just talk a little bit about, and excuse me if you just said it and I just didn't get it, on the RFI we put out in '23 that Grady Associates did, and they came back with their map, correct?
That's the survey plan, yeah.
Right,
The
survey
survey of the
plan.
site. Shows the 2 lots, the upper lot that's referred to a lot, by others when we're at these meetings, and then obviously the larger parcel that's got the gymnasium and the rink on it. So, and again, if the town were to take a portion of the upper lot and want to cut it off of the land, you could, present an A&R plan to the planning board, and that could, get signed off and redo the lot lines, and, to whatever the town, the needs of the town are. Or if you decided to put a fire station, you could, use the lower portion and, do whatever you want to do with that, so.
So questions on the Article 97 discussion first?
Hi.
Counselor Swope?
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I know what you said, I heard what you said.
Yeah.
So the applicability of Article 97 to municipalities to comply with this policy, all of that material is not necessarily the situation we're in. That, in other words, it says, I thought it said in the policy of 97 that municipalities that seek to dispose of any Article 97 land must, and then there's a whole set of things that they have to do to dispose of the land any differently than was set forth in the deed. Am I wrong about that?
No, but the problem is that the Article 97 protection wasn't there when they merged these properties with those original 5 deeds. Ingleside Park certainly is different, but this, parcel here where they created the schools and whatnot were created through 5 deeds. I can certainly have Attorney Cipolletta come in and give you a more in-depth description of that and along with the deeds, but,
Yeah.
that's why the rules don't apply here.
Well, maybe not, maybe, I would like to know.
Yeah.
So I could.
Certainly available,
I
if
could
you want to
meet
give
with
him a call. Yeah.
but I would like to understand that better,
Sure.
because we have not done anything with the property for such a long time, so we've kind of abandoned that property, right?
I wouldn't say,
middle
no,
school?
abandonment, no. You've been paying utilities on it, you've been using the gymnasium, the rink, yeah.
All right.
Abandonment definitely is not an issue,
All right,
yeah.
okay, so I would like to understand how we don't have to go through all these regulations to change.
Yep, and certainly, you know, more in depth, I can have them come in and give an update on the case law and why that is
Well,
relevant.
I mean, the whole council may not be as fascinated with that as I am, so, but I would like to know, so if not, I can set aside another time to talk with him.
Counselor Munson, and then Counselor Castaneda.
Thank you, Tony, for the survey and the site plan and so forth. This, when I say survey versus site plan, are the two words different?
I mean, there's a surveyed plan, as, you know, site plan is just a picture, right, with no, the boundaries are there, but they haven't been surveyed by a land surveyor with benchmarks and, you know, meets and bounds. This is a surveyed plan.
Okay.
Done by a certified land surveyor.
Okay, so is it safe to say that the current lots that we have mapped out in this survey, if we were to maintain these, to maintain the building, let's say we put new residential at the top of the hill, which is what a lot of the Waldemar and the residential people have approved and agreed to, would we actually need to do, we would have nothing to do with the Article 97. There would be no problems with Article 97 because we are reusing land that has already been designated for non-Article 97, correct?
The top of the hill, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's what the conclusion of the Attorney Letter and others are, yeah.
And I think this conclusion also kind of says that if we were to go into beyond these lots, that we would have to go through the rigorous process of trying to take what is already recreational land, go to the state and ask for their approval to turn it over?
That's not what the memo says, no.
No, okay. That's not what I want, I'm just asking if that's what
Not
the
for the area
conclusion-
that's marked out here with regard to the rink, the gym. I mean, obviously Ingleside Park's a different story, but that's a
Okay,
different section.
so the safe way to look at this is that if we stick within the concurrent lots, we're safe. We don't have to do any litigious procedural process with the state.
Correct. That was the conclusion of Attorney Letter.
So then I guess my next question would then be with zoning. Would be great to see, so the CBD that was voted upon, and I believe it was 2020? CBD zoning?
2016, I believe they did have it, but in 2021 in June.
I think it's 2016 and
they dealt with
2019, I
these
think,
two.
yeah.
Okay. So that zoning currently, it would be great to have an overlay of what the CBD allows for and where that kind of extends to. But is that something that can be easily overlaid?
I mean, we have our zoning maps, we can overlay the zoning maps on there, it shows the CBD district, sure.
So in that regard, I guess I'd like to ask a historical question. Would a biotech or some industrial organization that Max alludes to that would love to be at Four Banks, would they have been able to take this property at the top of Waldemar and Wheelock, that where the old middle school currently exists, would they be able to reside there, build there, and have they looked at it in the past, is I guess my bigger
Well, I
question.
guess, so you just brought up two more things that had been that I didn't even put
Right.
down. One was that we did look out and contacted different community colleges in the area to see if they would like to do an annex there. We were told no, we were told that they were downsizing rather than upsizing. And again, this is several years ago. And we also tried to look for incubate space for different biotech companies to come and use it as a commercial space, right, rental space. And we had no success with that. So I don't know if that answers both your questions.
It does help, because we would have, if there was such a demand for industrial in Winthrop, it could have been had already, is my point. There's land that would have been possible. So I'm not sure I'm necessarily buying the whole idea. The one thing that, I guess I'm trying to do is make sure that we're not trying to, have this big picture of what we're, I'm trying to do what's realistic, long-term, but also is feasible. And I think the cost is the big part of that we need to get back to, is some of these ideas that have been thrown around have been great ideas, but what is feasible? I appreciate the information. Thank you for the answers.
Counselor Castaneda?
Thank you, Council President. I do want to echo Councilor Swope's opinion on having the titles and deeds presented to the council, that will help us establish a baseline, not just for the council, but for the public record, for everyone to understand that we're all working with the same information. I read the memo. I think the conclusion is gonna stand exactly how Attorney Ciboletta wrote it. He included an appendix about Article 97, where it states that the only thing that really qualifies you for Article 97 is land that was taken for the purpose of conservation, agriculture, mineral, forest, water, air, and other natural resources, which a middle school, a gymnasium, and an ice rink are not conservation or use of other natural resources. It's structures that we build for, town
Municipal
use.
uses, right.
Just to address Councilor Munson's point, just because folks aren't interested in a lot that's directly in the center of town, doesn't mean they wouldn't be interested in another area of town. And I don't know if we'd want to limit it to just one field of industry, but you gotta have a little bit more of an open mind when it comes to how we're gonna survive as a town going forward with limited capacity to continue to raise taxes on our residents and not much in terms of commercial or industrial availability here. We need to think about that. Again, part about thinking that far ahead is gonna require us to create a master plan, to have an idea, to have a vision, to start with that financial impact study, which I know, Tony, thank you Mr. Manager, thank you very much for opening that and getting that started. I look forward to hearing from the consultant on that when they wrap that up. So thank you. And that's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Aiello.
Thanks, Mr. President. Tony, a couple of things. One is just a request. So for those of us who've looked at a lot of surveys, it's easy to read, but for the layperson who sort of wants to understand this site, this could use some colorizing and maybe some bolder labels.
Sure.
Before you post it online. I think that would really be helpful for
Yep.
people to understand boundaries, et cetera.
Yep.
So thank you on that. On the existing conditions plan, it confirms what we've been told in the past, which is that if you go behind the skating rink, there's a piece of what we now use and refer to as Ingleside Park that's within these parcels, right? That's correct?
The roadway piece, the one we paved, is that what you're talking about?
Kind of by the
No,
home
down-
plate area.
Right.
My
Oh,
home.
behind, yeah,
On-
exactly.
on
yeah,
Walden
yeah, yeah.
Street.
Yep.
A sizable area there. So I think one of the things for the council to think about is in disposition. I don't know if that contaminates in 97, because we've been using it openly as a park for a long time, but one of the things as a policy issue may be to sort of think about restricting the limits of the site for redevelopment so that none of Ingleside Park, as we know it today, is affected. But we don't have to decide that today. I just want to raise that issue. That's sort of what comes out of that triangle there, that you probably can all see where that
We're
is.
talking about this, right?
That triangle, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but let's not lose that and have that as a discussion at a future meeting. Thank you.
Councilor DeMarco.
So when it comes to Article 97, it seems like everybody wants to try to skirt the issue, try to like tweak things. How can we build this? How can we? Ingleside Park is not for sale. It is parkland. That is it, period. Okay? So anything that needs to be built on the current footprint of the buildings that are already there.
Yeah, that's what this
Okay.
memo says, correct.
Correct. I want to make that clear. Ingleside Park will not be affected by this.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Swope.
Tony, if we were to move the basketball courts over here, is this the triangle that you're talking about and where the
We're
basketball?
talking about behind the rink, I think there's already existing baseball
It
field
would
there
be
now.
there.
Yeah,
It would be
correct.
there, basically, yes. Not exactly this
Not
triangle.
exactly in that triangle, but it's in
Yes,
that
in that space.
general vicinity. Yeah.
Okay, so then it's not part of Ingleside Park, this is part of the other.
I think part of it, I think when you lay it
I think it'd
out,
be
part
half
of it
and
might
half,
be in Ingleside
basically,
Park.
if you-
Yeah, just like the baseball field is now. Part of the backstop is probably on that piece of triangle piece, and then the rest of the field goes out into Ingleside Park.
And that's allowable?
Recreation, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of stuff on Ingleside Park. We have
I know we do.
skate parks and tennis courts and, yeah,
I know, I just didn't know how we got those, but that's all right,
Yeah.
right?
it's recreation, yeah.
And just for clarification too, because I've wondered this a lot, and I wondered it way back when we did the repaving of the road. I understand this, I agree with it. However, if, I don't know, if we were to develop where the middle school is, and part of the thought was to have an entryway on Brookfield Road where that road is not part of this. I mean, my opinion has always been it's not technically a legal road or access point. What would we have to do with that?
I have to look at that. I mean, it's there, it exists. I mean, I have to get you an answer on that. I don't want to say anything tonight that would,
No,
Mark
just,
us in.
wanted to know, because it's always been there, and
how was it
it's-
constructed originally?
Well, I know back in 16 or 15, when we were doing the transition space for the new school, I
Right.
think there was upwards of $80,000 put into, to repave that road and to make it a little wider. And the thought always from some of us was that we probably shouldn't have done that, or should have looked into it more. And I just, we talked about possible developer going into the old middle school and doing that. Well, would they have really access to that?
Okay.
Counselor Aiello.
And just a follow-up idea, for those of us who want to make sure that Ingleside Park as we know it, forget about the lot lines, is protected, can you have someone think about drawing a hypothetical line that would, there'd probably be two lines. One is a line that up to the edge of the buildings would be Ingleside Park, but there may be a 10-foot easement for maintenance of the buildings to be able to get to the outside of the buildings or something like that.
Right.
It'd be something I think that would be helpful to those of us here who want to make sure that as we're going about this, we're doing no harm to Ingleside.
Absolutely, and also, like talked about, if you do an approval not required plan, an A&R plan, you could adjust those lot lines to, take
Yeah,
that triangle out and
that's
move it
right.
over and do that.
That's right.
Leaving the, the access and any sort of future possible expansion. I know there's talk about locker rooms, I know in the front, but potentially off the back as well, so just making sure you cover yourself on there as well.
Counselor Munson?
Yeah, Tony, I don't know if you were here for this, but we had talked about the idea that, or actually Jim actually mentioned that and I believe it was 2018, there was a developer that was interested in taking the old middle school and turning it into 65 units. For us to put an RFP out, would we need to direct the RFP in a way where we would say, this is for taking the current existing building and doing a rehab, or can you just leave it open?
Well, it all depends, not open, I wouldn't say open completely, but if you're looking for housing options, you certainly could do an RFP to ask for housing alternatives or potential ideas for that site.
And if you were to do housing RFP and put it out there, there's a wire of some kind that you put it out and people, like all the big developers get to know this?
Yeah, you'd advertise it, give it to local realtors, the central register, like we did before when we did the one for the, for the sports complex.
And then when you do something like that, are you directing that RFP in a way where you would say, we would prefer but are open to ideas on X percentage for affordable housing with the possibility of workforce housing?
You can put in the RFP whatever you want. I mean, it's just, you don't
You don't,
want to make it too broad where you don't end up getting anybody or but you want to leave all options on the table. If somebody's got a creative idea, you certainly don't want to.
and do you have
I'll let everybody
everything
know
you
you're looking for
need to be able to submit something like that, an RFP
You
for
have to
housing?
generate it and certainly bring it to the council for approval, so, like we did before with the R5 for the, for the rink, for the
And so,
sports
and
complex.
what negative is there, that you can think of, for putting something out there for housing for just the current old middle school lot? Is there any kind of, negative, or what?
And for, you're asking for ideas, right? I mean, you're not looking for a proposal, so be careful how you phrase it, like you're really looking for information, so you're putting it out on RFI, in my opinion, so.
And then developers would then come back with, to what degree what are we gonna see from that? What do you foresee?
They'll put in, conceptual ideas, square foot costs, things like that. I mean, I don't think they can get into too much detail, but they may show a quick, layout of what could fit there. They've all got access to GIS software and things like that,
Can you
the bigger
make it so that
developers.
you can direct the RFP so that it would be condo or ownership only,
Like I
not?
said, John, you can put whatever you want in there.
Okay.
I mean, that'd be up for the council.
All right,
to
and then
decide.
before I move on, if I could just ask two other questions. Would you be able to, or do you know of companies, I know that, I'm not sure if you were here for this, but Councilor Costigan did bring up a company that specializes in rehabbing old theaters and then taking it as a partnership with the municipalities. Have you heard of that before? And
There's other groups out there. I'm familiar with the group in Danvers. I know,
Oh, you do?
Lynn Auditorium did something similar. We looked at it, that auditorium had to be completely gutted only because of the pitch of the walkway isn't accessible. So you'd have to infill that, brand new seating, new stage, the whole thing, so.
That's why it's so
That's why it's
expensive.
expensive, yeah, that would all have to be done, but, I mean, anything's possible. I mean, Lynn Auditorium does well, the Danvers Auditorium does well. I mean, there's certainly a contingent in town that has certainly pushed for that and wants to, for the arts and entertainment and shows we could bring to town, things like that.
And so, but to be able to resume that as a theater, wouldn't we need more parking? And more like, I mean, it seems to me like we're limited already.
You've got you've got the little side lots, you've got on-street parking, I mean, it's just, you would need some parking, sure, I mean, but that's something to discuss if you look at it, so. I mean, what did you do when you had, all the the high school events, when you used that auditorium for those events? I mean, those people lived in town, so you probably didn't have as many out-of-towners coming in, but, parking, you'd have to deal with it that way, so, between the on-street and things like that.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like a no-brainer to go ahead and get this RFP going for residential with some direction from us as to what kind. And then it also seems like a no-brainer to get quotes for doing the rehab of both the gym and the auditorium. If someone else was interested, or if we thought that this was something that we were getting closer to, I don't see why we wouldn't make a motion and see if we can get that going.
Councilor Ayala. Councilor Ayala.
Thanks, Mr. President. A couple of questions. One is that I think Pat and maybe somebody else mentioned how people looked at the ability to redevelop community assets that would stay community assets, such as a performing arts center or a pool or all that stuff. It sounds like they created nonprofits that would be able to accept contributions and grants and all that stuff. If that's a course that we as a larger community wanted to follow to try to create a community asset with that, is that nonprofit something that the town creates, or is that something that citizens need to band together to form that up? Do you know generally how that works?
The latter, usually, the citizens band together, or you reach out to a local nonprofit that's
An
maybe already
existing
doing it and
nonprofit.
look to partner with them.
Okay. and then
Similar to the YMCA is a nonprofit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of,
So you could use a
Yeah.
nonprofit like that to
Correct.
accept donations and all that stuff. The second is, not for today, but for the future, we've been talking a lot about things that we sound good, at least to me, and I think others have said it, 55-plus housing and workforce housing. Are there some basic primers that tell you sort of how they work? So as an example, when we decide to go the path, if we decide to go to the path of workforce housing, how do we make sure that that workforce housing is for workforce, for people who are working for Winthrop and for the Winthrop workforce, and how does the Winthrop workforce defined? I'd hate to sort of go halfway down the road and find out that, my old friends from East Boston are all moving in and taking up workforce. I'm just kidding, people from East Boston. I love you dearly. But, so just something that we can read, or this off-the-shelf things that you can.
yeah, I
look
mean,
at
there's stuff out there
others.
for work, I haven't done a project like that yet. I've
Yeah,
done
I-
stuff with groups like Harbor Light and, that do affordable housing, things like
Yeah.
that. but it doesn't really necessarily workforce housing. When you do the affordable housing component, you certainly can have lotteries and dedicated units for Winthrop residents, and they go in a lottery system. I've seen that process, but as far as specific to workforce, I haven't, I'd have to research that.
Yeah, if you could just get us websites that we could go to that make life easier, because I have no idea how that stuff works, and I think if we're gonna talk about that stuff, and I think we should talk about this stuff, we should make sure we understand how
Yep.
these things work before we go too far down the road.
Counselor Swope?
Tony, is there a possibility of doing any underground parking? Just here, or because of our land, it doesn't?
The way the grade goes, I mean, certainly on the upper portion, you could, when you built the structure, you could do underground parking. Then the option with the fire trucks, have them come in and go out the front. They were probably gonna come upgrade a little bit, and you could do probably some limited underneath, depending upon what you wanted to do up there. But the way the grade from that road that, the potential road that you shouldn't have built, whatever, comes in, you can come in under there, and with the grade of the property, you could probably do some limited underground parking there for, say, there was residential or condos above or something like that. But it all depends on the site layout and what you're proposing to do there.
And just again, because somebody said underground parking before, when that developer was coming in, it wasn't underground parking, it was coming into where the cafeteria was. That was their thought, way back, whatever. They weren't gonna build underneath it. They were gonna have the driveway come into where where the cafeteria is now. That would have been, so the basement floor would have been parking, and then use the existing elevators to get up to the units.
Yeah, I was just thinking underground parking is a great idea. I didn't even think it was possible because of our water table and where we are. And
I
so-
think everything's possible
Well,
with money.
Yeah.
I mean, they built the Ted Williams Tunnel, and everything's
Oh, that's
possible.
right. That's a thought. Build a
Request
tunnel.
information,
Yeah,
just
sure.
request information, speaking of water table and all that, can you post and provide to the council, sort of what Winthrop originally looked like in this area? Because I think a lot of it was marshland and filled, over time. So
A
it'd be
map
good to
from like
from whenever.
1700s?
Yeah,
1620,
sounds right.
whenever the John Winthrop,
Trying to even pull that out of my
I
back
know,
pocket,
pick
yeah.
a-
I'd have to do a little homework on that, but yeah.
1800 or
Yeah.
something, pick sometime.
Yeah.
Get to work, Tony.
Yeah.
It would be good, because I know I've seen some old maps at the Historic
at the library.
Society.
I think we have it at the library there in the museum section
Yeah,
or
it's
something
pretty-
similar.
it's pretty,
Yeah,
It'd be
Vice
helpful
President-
to circulate that.
Vice
even over at the
President
EB
Belichick.
Newton.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple things as we're talking about moving forward. I think the terms we use are important. And when we talk about throwing something out there to see what comes back, it's a request for information and idea. I think I've seen it listed, RFI as information, innovation, and ideas, or something like that. So that's just, the request for proposal is a little further down the road, so I just wanted to clarify that. But if we're thinking about housing, a few things have come up: affordable housing, workforce housing, 55-plus housing. So I think it may be a good charge for the new Affordable Housing Committee to look at the types of housing, the restrictions they bring, the funding sources they potentially open up, the revenue they generate, and how they would interplay with our current tax base. I think that's all important stuff for us to look at, because we can talk hypothetically for a long time, but until we see that all laid out, I think it would be very hard to kind of reach a solid plan for what makes the most sense as far as what's gonna generate the revenue we want and serve the populations we want. So I think we need to just make sure we have information before we talk loosely about that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Any other thoughts? All right, well, we wanted to keep this an hour and a half. It's an hour and 20 minutes. It's, in a lot of ways, it's good information. A lot of ways, it's back to where we started from. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating. I think, I totally respect and understand a lot of the counselors wanting to come up with plans and to think long and hard, and I think it's more realistic in what we can get accomplished. We're not certain other municipalities. We have limited resources. We have, we have issues with people wanting to come to they think it's hard to get to Winthrop to come to an event or whatever it happens to be. But I'd like to try to be realistic. I'd like to at least, and not tonight, but at least if we could think about, because it's been brought up a few times, and I brought it up once, if we can, either put to bed, or if there's anyone that thought that there was time to make a change for a potential firehouse, because I think that is still, along with the schools, my number one priority right now. I think it should be all of ours, but, we made a unanimous decision based on knowledge and thought and cost and such. If there's a thought of a change for that, I would hope it would be brought up at the next meeting. And with that, Counselor DeMarco?
I don't understand why it's such a deeply divided issue. Tear down the building. Like, worst case scenario, we have green space. Best case scenario, somebody builds on the current property lines of the building. It doesn't cost that much to tear it down. It's a win-win. Let's do it now. We don't have to argue about it. There's nothing to argue about.
I don't disagree with tearing down the building. I've brought it up at several of most frequent meetings. The first thing is the cost. It does cost money. It costs upwards of close to 2 million, let's say 1.6 to 2 million. I've thought, wow, it's more attractive. Maybe we see it down and we say, you know what, green space is the way to go, or these 5 lots are the way to go to bring in some revenue and to keep some green space. Or if we are gonna do a firehouse on the basketball courts, and we are gonna put a rectangle basketball courts with more hot top, then that would open up and change and recreate that green space up there. So it is great if we could just tear it down. We don't have $1.8 million to tear it down.
Respectfully, and I do mean this respectfully, Council President, we are wasting a lot of money every year on that building being up, and nobody's done anything about it. That's the problem. That's all. I'm done.
All right, Vice President Belcher?
Thank you. Just to comment on that, Counselor DeMarco, when I talked about looking at the different housing opportunities and what funding opportunities that could generate, there are some pockets of money within the state that are tied to housing plans that potentially could help us with those demolition costs.
Okay.
So, and I understand $70,000 a year to keep a building up and running is a lot, considering we don't utilize the entire building, but it is nowhere near $2 million, which is part of, we asked for 5 for the schools, you know what I mean? It's a lot more money than I think you're thinking it may be.
No, fair point.
Counselor Swope?
Max, this is for you. I understand, because I brought this up about the $2 million, I believe, the last time, and I believe you said the money's gone.
Which 2 million?
Bond money from the state?
Which 2 million?
The demolition of the building that Hannah just brought up, that she said the state may have money that we could use to demolish,
The state has bond authorization, which is a whole different thing than actual money ready to hand over to the town.
Right, correct.
Okay.
It's in a bond bill
Authorized to
with
borrow that money,
hundreds of millions of other
but it would
items.
need to be in the governor's
Capital plan.
capital improvement plan
We're not
in order
exactly the
to,
governor's best
in order
friend
to
right now.
make its way through a vehicle at the state level down to the municipal, down to our level.
Yeah, that's why Lydia's comments, I was excited about the $2 million. I thought it was misleading in that comment, because if it's a bond and it comes down to us and it's in the capital plan, that's a far cry from being able to use that money this year to tear down that building.
Yeah.
Vice President Belcher?
Just to clarify, I haven't done the research on what's available, but I think that's what I meant, or I don't think that's what I meant, that is what I meant when I said we need to look at what types of housing can potentially open up different opportunities. I don't know everything that's out there, so I just don't want it
Yeah,
to
just Max
appear.
had an idea about that, that's why.
Counselor Tessenari?
So the way that authorization works though, right, is that's all tied to 3A right now. That whole housing bond bill is. Part of it is tied to putting housing in that footprint. part of it is not. So were we in compliance with 3A, we could ask our senator to ask the governor to put the part that's not tied to housing, if that's not what we're deciding to do, in the capital plan for us to receive that in the next capital plans, 5 years. We could probably see it in a year, not in FY '26, because that plan is already being built without us in it. But in FY '27, we
Maybe.
could see that 2 million put to use to tear down the existing middle school. But it's, all those strings are attached.
That's what I thought. I did think there were strings with it, I just wanted to bring that up.
There's
That's what I thought.
strings with everything.
Certainly, Strang.
Counselor Munson.
Do I need to make a motion to ask for quotes on rehabbing the gym and the auditorium?
You need to make motions for it, yes, but we're not making any motions tonight. It's a special meeting. There's no public comment. I think there should be public comment on anything that we're going to vote on. So, in the past, we've had these meetings. I've gone to legal to make sure we could have a roundtable meeting so we could have discussion, and they've been in private. We had legal authorization to do it, which was the thought tonight, but where this is just such a hot topic, and for transparency, I just thought it would be better to invite the public, but I don't want to be making motions or voting on anything without public input.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
In a few minutes, you can. Counselor Aiello.
Before you beat me to the punch, I just wanted to thank the council president for convening this,
Yes.
and for all the councilors for a great discussion, and Tony for supporting all the work here. This is, I found a very helpful exercise,
Me too.
and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next meeting. So, Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just one last comment.
Yes.
I just want to make a comment with regards to, people not frequenting Winthrop. I think you alluded to, the attractiveness of Winthrop and maybe, won't bring in people. Maybe that was pointed towards the auditorium. I don't know what it was, but I can assure you that people love this town. During the good weather months, 500 people frequent Deer Island daily, let alone 1,000 during the weekends, every day. On top of that, we have the yacht clubs. Top of that, we have great restaurants here. This is a seaside community. The attraction factor is here. And the off hours, if you give them an entertainment center to maybe tool over to after a couple of cocktails down the yacht club, I think they'd take full advantage of it. So I just want to be clear that this town has a lot to offer the outside world. So I end it there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to clarify that was in regards to, for example, the rink. We, for 20 years, have been trying to get other Winthrop has to go to Wilmington and Woburn and Burlington to play hockey, but it's very hard to get them to use our rink because of the travel, which we've never understood. We had a girls' hockey program that we still have, that we used to have 3 games a week in our rink, and now that's harder to do. And it's always boggled my mind why the commute is different from us to go to Burlington or from Burlington to come to us. That's just the consensus of that. Has nothing to do, obviously, with the charm of the town and what the town has to offer. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn by Councilor DeMarco.
Stole my motion.
Second. By Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Munson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.